Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, in today's modern political landscape, everyone says they want to be bipartisan or try to do bipartisan things, but actually, rolling up your sleeves and trying to do it are two very, very different things. And if you're within the sound of my voice, guess what? You must be in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals, and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion. And, if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you do, because, let's face it, you're listening right now. And if you are, hit that subscribe button. Subscribe, give us the old like, give us the old 5-star rating on your podcast provider of choice. We're pretty much everywhere over at Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and many, many others. And plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we would absolutely appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on the Facebook, we're on the Twitter, we're on the Instagram, we're on the TikTok, and we're on the Letterboxd for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because, if we love to write about it and talk about it and watch it, well, we love it when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please, pay us a visit. On this episode, oh boy, we got a real interesting one. This is a documentary that we've been following for a while. It did its festival run, and it just hit theaters not too long ago. And it's a fascinating film. It's called The First Step. It's a documentary. It's a political documentary from filmmakers Brandon and Lance Kramer. And basically what it is, it's the story of actually trying to work across party lines, because it takes us back to just not that long ago from in America when Van Jones, an activist, someone who's doing some good stuff on all sorts of fronts, really stirred up some controversy by trying to work across party lines during the Trump administration to get a landmark criminal justice reform bill passed, which ended up having a more humane response to the opioid crisis and the addiction crisis, which is going on in America. And the bill, spoiler alert, the bill got passed, but it's just to see this guy attempting to actually build bridges between people during such a time of political divisiveness was absolutely fascinating to watch. And I could not take my eyes off it as Van quite admittedly took some body blows along the way in order to get what he believed was an important bill passed, and it did get passed. But to see the story of the genuine work and the trials and tribulations that it took to get this done is, again, fascinating. And like I said, we had the chance to sit down with the filmmakers, Brandon and his brother Lance, and just really broke down sort of the origins of why they wanted to make this film, and the highs and lows and the struggles therein, and just really providing audiences with a really fascinating glimpse into the political process, and how just an example of how change can actually happen, but just with the realities of that, it ain't easy to do. But if you're in the States, I do recommend you go find a theater and you go find a way to watch The First Step, which is playing now. But first, enjoy our talk with Brandon and Lance Kramer about this fascinating film, because between you and me, it is a darn good one. No, obviously, first off, just thank you so much for the time today, and congrats on the film, man. I thought it was a hell of a piece of work.
Thank you. Means a lot. Really means a lot.
Now, I guess my first question is, because, I did a little bit of reading. I know you guys had a little bit of history with Van, but walk me through what was the kickoff to want to make this film, because, he is such an interesting subject. I mean, in this day and age, when we live in such a divisive world of, if you're not with me for against me, having some guy who's trying to exist in the middle is this very unique thing to see unfold.
Yeah, you said it. I mean, the 2016 election had just happened. Trump was now the president of the United States. Lance and I sat down with Van over a cup of tea, and Van, I said to Van, what does the next 4 years look like for you? And he basically said, look, a lot of my peers, a lot of progressive leaders on the left are going to be fighting and resisting this administration at all costs. And that's important. But I feel like my role in this moment is to find some way of working across the aisle and building a relationship and trying to get something accomplished under this administration. And as documentary filmmakers, we felt like Van was basically setting out to do the impossible. He was going against the grain. He was trying to build a relationship with Republicans, with Trump, with Jared Kushner in a time of extreme polarization. And at that time, the bill didn't exist. Van didn't know Jared, but I felt like whatever happened, documenting and telling a story of bridge building in action under this moment in time would be extremely instructive to the public around how to work across divides in this moment in time.
No, I mean, to really document this, I've got to imagine there were some tough conversations to just be able to get into the room, because I mean, again, as two white filmmakers, you're not necessarily going to understand or be able to be viewed as an ally or a friend when it comes to the Black experience. How did you guys sort of manage to engender trust to be able to get into the room, to be able to see those conversations?
Yeah, it's a great question. And well, it started with our relationship with Van, which, as you said, it wasn't, that conversation over tea was not conversation number one. We had almost like a 5-year relationship with him and multiple projects that we had, worked together on. So the relationship started there. And then, we had a relationship with him. Then as his team grew, as he advocated for the bill, we started to build relationships with Jessica, with Lewis. And then he started to build this coalition in South Central LA and West Virginia. And, walking into both sets of communities, when I went into West Virginia, on the wall of the sheriff of McDowell County's office, it said, the media does not represent us. When I went into LA for the first time, there had been a historical misrepresentation of those communities. So it took a lot of work and time just getting to know these different communities. As a white filmmaker in particular, our interest and passion was in trying to document how bridges are built in this country. We were actually interested in how white and Black communities were coming together, progressive and conservative, and that led us to a point where, as Van was working on trying to bridge these divides, it became clear that a lot of the conflict in his life and a lot of the conflict in Lewis's life and other advocates that were working on this bill were with other progressive Black advocates, not just Black, but some Black communities. And so, we built a really diverse team to work with us to help us understand the lived experiences of different activists and advocates and what that experience was like. There are different points of view, and also on the right too, because we weren't just filming with, progressive activists. We were also filming with Jared Kushner and conservatives from West Virginia. So had to build our understanding and empathy into those communities as well. It took us having to develop a very broad understanding into lots of different people's backgrounds and opinions and views.
Well, and I mean, there's something about this film that I really appreciated, because I mean, in many ways, it allows us as the viewer to see the building of a bill, but without it being didactic or sort of, paint dry, like you're watching paint dry. How difficult was it for you guys to be able to frame this story, but still get sort of salient facts out there, because I mean, again, I was fascinated but never bored. You know what I mean? Like, this could have easily gone to a very boring place, but it didn't. And I mean, I think that's a credit to both of you.
Yeah, I'll answer, and Lance can chime in on the next one. It wasn't boring what was happening. Like, I was,
Oh no, I just mean on paper, like sort of the like a bill, like something coming into law feels very dry.
Totally. No, I was just saying what in front of my eyes was happening was, I was just like, oh my God, this is extremely emotional. The stakes for these different advocates were extremely high. They're walking in representing, thousands of people incarcerated. Their advocacy was causing enormous fractures within the movement, and they were getting alienated by, other activists. So the emotional stakes were high. And Lance and I really set out. We grew up in the Washington area. We felt like we didn't really understand how bills become a law.
Yeah.
We were like, okay, you check the New York Times, Washington Post, every newspaper, like constantly talking about legislation. Well, what does it actually look like for a bill to come into fruition? What is the human story behind that? And the complexities of that. So it took fighting really hard to get access into conversations and meetings that you never see. We were in and out of the Trump White House, senators on both sides of the aisle, grassroots communities on the right and on the left. And it's really messy is how laws are actually passed. It takes somebody like Louis Reed, who served, a very long time in federal prison, walking into a senator's office, pleading his case and his lived experience in the criminal justice system. That conversation impacting that senator's mindset around this issue. Those conversations lead to a piece of paper that's a bill. That bill is marked up, debated, fought over, and then that bill went to the House for a vote, passed an overwhelming bipartisan majority, went to the Senate for a vote, passed an overwhelming bipartisan majority. Several occasions, it was almost dead, and it was resurrected, one time through Kim Kardashian's advocacy, several other times through other people's advocacy. And then, of all people, the president of the United States, Donald Trump, who ran on a law and order platform, signed the bill. And I hope that the film can demystify the legislative process for people and also give a little bit of hope. We live in such a cynical time where getting anything done across the aisle feels impossible. And in this story, it was a bipartisan victory. It had real consequences. And it fractured the movement in some consequential ways, but it also resulted in the freedom of tens of thousands of people's lives.
For sure. Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the most important thing, because I mean, again, in seeing this, I felt sort of the conviction that Van had to pretty much get something done, because I mean, throughout the film, and I mean, this is something we don't always appreciate, but we see the body blows. Like, we see the abuse that the man took. I mean, was he, like, how important was it for him to sort of depict that, hey, listen, I'm going to get my ass kicked while we do this, but it's important to see that?
I think if Van
Lance, you don't have anything to say. I'm worried.
Okay. No. I'm just, I know, trying to go for it.
I'll just say one other thing, and then Lance can take over. He can finish out the interview. If Van had his druthers, he would not have had those moments filmed. So, that took a year to get to a point where, when he does an interview with Jared Kushner, is getting dragged through the mud on social media, that he's willing to have me show up in his apartment with a camera, filming him navigating these, internal and external crises. That took a lot of trust. And it at the end of the day, I basically communicated to Van, look, this film will only work if we can see you at your best, when you are triumphing, when you're succeeding, when your bridge building work is really working, and when it's not. Otherwise, it's not of any use or value to the American people to see a rose-colored view of what bridge building looks like, and no one's going to believe it anyways.
Yeah. Is there anything in this entire process that maybe surprised you or caught you off guard? Because I mean, I can imagine, especially when it came down to sort of having access to the White House, I'm sure you guys were living in sort of constant fear that it could be pulled at any second.
Yeah, everything. I feel like every frame of this film was, in a sense, some kind of battle.
Right.
Nothing came easy in this film, and nothing was ever. You could, to your point, I think you read into the film correctly that it was always very fragile. Everything was always very fragile. So just being able to be granted, access or an invitation to be somewhere was never a guarantee that you could still film. You could, Brandon, I could tell you plenty of stories of showing up somewhere and then waiting outside of a room for hours, hoping to have the chance to go in. A lot of times you did. Several times you just sit outside of a room and never get welcomed in or invited in. So there's a lot of that kind of thing happening throughout the process. And with the White House, interestingly enough, there weren't that many other people like us that were trying to film in the White House. So once we got through those initial conversations and presented ourselves and were very clear and transparent about who we were and what we were trying to do, they actually were welcoming to us. And I will say that it's not like we had full reign over the
Of course,
West
yeah.
Wing, but we were able to be there in those moments. And I don't think that they were getting a lot of calls from filmmakers who were telling these kinds of stories to be there. So in a sense, I do think that they saw the merits in being able to at least have the story documented. But it was perilous, just trying to keep track of everything that was happening, because as you see, the film kind of moves through all these different places.
Sure,
People, we were a big team in some respects by an independent film standard, but still pretty small and scrappy. And we were trying to also just track all that and keep tabs on where we needed to be and what's happening and how to have a crew in all these places. And it was just a constant, almost scurrying about to try to just stay on top of things and to tell a story at the same time too, and not just feel like we're constantly catching up, but to really have a clear sense of what was the story that was happening. And it's really to Brandon's credit, and then also to the editor's credit in the edit, to be able to really identify clearly what that narrative would be and not tell that story in like an 8-part 40-hour series.
Right. And I mean, to both of your credit, I mean, I think something that really works is that, like, even when we had those moments that, weren't working, or there was pushback on the issue from whomever, we got a clear understanding of why there was pushback, rather than it just being pushback for the sake of pushback. And just to see the conflict and to see the division, even internally, on an idea which obviously everyone was being very supportive of, but it's just the politics inside that are so incredibly fascinating. But I can imagine they're also maddening for you guys as well when you're trying to keep a narrative straight, because politics, as we all know, doesn't always make sense for on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, well, I really got to give flowers to our editors, Stephen Galladay, Natasha Mantola, Leslie Simmer, Sarah Fusco, and then also we had these brilliant consulting editors, Louis Erskine, who has sadly passed away while we were finishing the film, Carol Deisinger, Steve James. We just had these brilliant minds that were working on the edit and wrestled with the material, developed just the structure of the film. Took so much work. The finished film is version 33.
Oh, wow.
It's V33. It was 2-year edit, 33, not just little cuts. I mean, 33 versions of the film. So that's just constant, rigorous structural work to figure out how to tell the narrative in a cohesive way that had that kind of flow to it, but also gave you what you need, but not more than what you needed. So you got bogged down in all these, details that we had in the material, but also could just kind of get in the way of the story and make sure that it was still factually accurate. Really, really hard.
Now, I mean, I've
And
got to ask, and I mean, I asked specifically just about the moment of being in the room with Trump signing the bill. And I mean, obviously, there is the significance and the emotional impact of getting the job done and witnessing that fantastic moment. But I couldn't help but focus on the fact that it was this giant Sharpie magic marker. I mean, and he's signing a law. Like for me, this should have been some sort of fancy fountain pen. Like when you're in that moment filming it, like did that even caught you off guard a little bit? Because in watching it, I was like, that's a big black marker. That's not a pen.
I can't say the size of the marker caught my eye. I think what was just, being in that room was, it's an extraordinary thing to see a group of people, spanning pretty broad political persuasions, to see Donald Trump signing a bill that we knew would free thousands of people from prison. It was like, you're just like, wait, like, what is happening here? Like, how did we get to this point? And I think for a lot of audiences, it's an uncomfortable moment because, here's this man who has caused enormous harm and damage to communities. And yet he was doing something that actually helped communities. And, frankly, there was, people that said, just cut that out, cut Trump signing the bill out of the film. And I was like, no, like this contradiction is what we have to sit with. And like, it's not by any means, I mean, all the terrible things he's done is in the film as well, but he did sign this bill. And that's a complexity that I, hope audiences can sit with. Also, just going back to your question about, the people that opposed it didn't just oppose it, one of the major goals of making this film was to create an empathetic experience for audiences to have with people from a very diverse political set of backgrounds. So, I think Patrisse Cullors, who was one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, she opposed the bill. I didn't want her represented in a way that was just as in opposition. I wanted to understand, what does it mean to be an abolitionist and why? And I want audiences that agree with her to feel respected. This is not a Van Jones. This movie is not just meant for people that love Van. It's meant for people across the board who are interested in this issue and interested in getting something accomplished. And I think our audience base has been really diverse, more diverse than most docs, as a result of that process of creating empathy from different vantage points.
Well, I would agree with that. And I mean, I think that empathy really highlights not just the contradiction of sort of the process of getting the bill signed into law and the fight therein, but just sort of the struggles in the United States when it comes down to sort of the prison system and genuine prison reform. And it highlights a very sort of complex thing that, at first thought you think, oh, well, just do this and then it'll be fixed. But no, it is such a dynamic and really fascinating thing to work through that I think you guys did a great job in highlighting that. I mean, I'm kind of curious, as this film is now getting out into audiences, what is your hope for the pull away that people will take from a film like this? Because again, like I said, this really felt like it existed in a bipartisan space as much as it possibly could.
My hope is that people walk away from the film being challenged and inspired. I think that you kind of need both.
Yeah, I see that.
Like, I think that it's for the inspiration to ring true. I think there has to be some healthy challenge through the process of experiencing the film, to at least be exposed to something that might get you to pause and think twice, or see another person's point of view or perspective, whoever that may be, because there's, as Brandon said, a lot of different kinds of people and points of view and perspectives that have been watching this film. And ultimately, the reason for all that is that I think that's what it takes to make change or get something done anytime, but especially right now. And we see it every day because we're reminded of the things that don't get done.
Yeah.
So if you're someone who cares about the country, care about the community that you live in, you're trying to get things accomplished through the system that we've got, it takes some degree of that empathy or compromise or connection to see some kind of progress. And if the film can offer some reference point or blueprint or roadmap that you don't have to follow exactly, but it's a reference point that could inform how you may go about fighting for a state prison reform bill, or frankly, just change on anything, climate, abortion, gun rights, immigration, and all these different issues could very well just stay stuck for years.
Yeah.
Or we could identify what does it take even to just move the needle a little bit. And that's on policy. And then when you just talk about on a personal level, whether it's breaking bread with an uncle that you don't talk to on the holidays, right, or, school board meetings, or whatever the more kind of micro levels that we actually find ourselves in day to day, I think that particularly the story of the people from Los Angeles and West Virginia offers some hope in how we can also bridge those divisions and find points of connection that can be really meaningful. And if that's what people can walk away from the film with, I would feel like our work we've done our work. And we've been trying to build the theatrical release with all of that in mind. So effectively, when the film is released later this month in 25 cities, every single theatrical presentation will be programmed with different local or national partners who are doing this kind of work. So audiences will have leaders from the community there in front of them who are really, in a sense, modeling on a local level the kinds of things you see in the film, and have ample opportunities to plug in to that work. If you're interested, if anyone, your listeners, are interested in finding out if the film's playing by them, they can go to firststepfilm.com or thefirststep.com, First Step Movie on social media, and then find out if they're close by. And then eventually the film will also be streaming so they can see it at home as well.
For sure. I mean, this is such a testament to sort of the emotional sort of awareness that kind of needs to be inserted into the system just in order to get shit done. And I mean, I think you guys have really put some clarity on that, and it's a fantastic piece of work. But seriously, thank you both for the time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate everything that you've shared with us, and grateful for this opportunity to talk with you.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.